Lauren Mitchell, and let me tell you a story. My sister's story, my story, and the story of what happens when the life you thought was perfect shatters in front of the entire world. I wasn't supposed to be part of it. I was supposed to be watching from a safe distance, 800 miles away, on my couch in Denver, sipping champagne and offering silent support through a wedding livestream. But some truths refuse to stay contained. One moment I was watching my sister walk down the aisle. The next, I was witnessing betrayal, manipulation, and a family legacy unravel live on camera. No one tells you what to do when the life you've spent years building isn't yours anymore, or when the people you trusted most turn out to be the ones who'd scripted your role from the beginning. What came next wasn't easy, it wasn't clean, but it was real. And sometimes, losing everything that never truly fit is how you find the life that finally does. So if you're ready, let me take you back to the day it all began. Chapter 1. The wedding I couldn't attend. You can watch the wedding online, my father said. The words landed heavier than any invitation. I stared at my phone, the screen lighting up with his message. There was a link, neatly pasted beneath the short line. No flowery greeting, no guilt-laden plea, just a sentence that said everything about how fractured we had become. I hadn't spoken to my sister Caroline in over 3 weeks, not since the fight about the bridesmaid dress. What started as a simple conversation about fabric choices had spiraled into a raw unspooling of every resentment we'd both buried for years. "The dresses aren't very forgiving," Mom had said. "Maybe you should try that diet I sent you before the fitting." I still remembered my hands shaking as I clutched the phone tighter. "I'm not dieting to fit into some dress for one day," I'd shot back. "Well, Caroline wants everything perfect. The photographer is very expensive." I'd hung up after saying words I couldn't take back, words that echoed even now. "Fine, I won't ruin your perfect photos with my imperfect body. I'm not coming." I'd cried for an hour after. Then came Dad's compromise. "It might be better this way. Less pressure for everyone. We're having it professionally streamed for relatives who can't travel. For relatives like me, who lived one time zone and 1,000 emotional miles away." Now, sitting cross-legged in my apartment in Denver, I looked around at the scene I'd prepared. I'd strung soft lights around the ceiling. On the coffee table, I'd laid out a cheese board, strawberries dipped in dark chocolate, and a bottle of champagne I'd been saving for some other special occasion, one that had never quite arrived. The navy blue dress I would have worn as a guest clung to me like borrowed armor. I'd curled my hair, applied makeup with a steady hand. A part of me wanted to look put together, even if no one would see. Maybe especially because no one would see. "Cheers to you, Caroline," I murmured to the empty room, raising my glass toward the laptop. "Hope your day is as perfect as you are." The live stream was set to begin 30 minutes before the ceremony. When the appointed time arrived, I clicked the link with a fluttering mix of dread and longing. The page stuttered. I refreshed it. Once. Twice. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. I was about to text my cousin Heather when the screen flickered to life. There it was. Hyde Park Golf and Country Club in Cincinnati looked as though it had been lifted from the pages of a bridal magazine. Rows of white chairs adorned with blush pink ribbons stretched out beneath an elaborate floral arch. Pale pink and white roses cascaded down from towering pedestals, crystal vases catching shafts of afternoon sunlight that danced across the manicured lawn. The camera zoomed in on the arriving guests. I spotted my mother's old college roommates in jewel-toned dresses. Our ancient great-uncle, Franklin, pinching cheeks with the same gusto as when we were 5. Neighbors from our childhood street who'd once watched Caroline and me race bikes down the block. Yet there was a divide. On the left, our family sat together in a cluster of familiar warmth, slightly stiff, the edges fraying. On the right, the Sullivans exuded a different kind of polish, country club tans, designer labels, polite detachment. I leaned closer as the view shifted to the bridal suite. Caroline sat before a gilded vanity, a stylist fixing her veil. My breath caught. She looked beautiful, but beneath the flawless exterior I saw a tightness around her eyes. The taut smile stretched too thin. The Caroline who taught me how to apply eyeliner without stabbing myself wasn't here. This was someone else. Behind her, bridesmaids in matching robes fluttered like nervous birds. Jessica, her maid of honor, paced, checking her phone with a look I recognized all too well. Something was wrong. "Is everything okay?" Caroline asked sharply. Jessica, startled. "Yes, just checking the time. We're right on schedule." I sat straighter, heart beginning to race. The camera shifted away, but not before I caught Jessica exchange a look with another bridesmaid. A flicker of alarm that sent a chill through me. A ping vibrated my phone. "Heather, something weird happening backstage. I'll text you." I stared at the message, the champagne flute trembling in my hand. What on earth was going on? I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. Heather's text burned in my mind. Something weird happening backstage. What could that mean on a day like this, when every moment had been planned within an inch of its life? The camera cut away again, this time to the groom's suite. Ryan Sullivan stood in a circle of groomsmen, downing a shot of amber liquid. His best man clapped him on the shoulder with too much force, both of them laughing too loudly. Through the open doorway, I caught a glimpse of Patricia Sullivan, Ryan's mother, her mouth a thin line as she pointed sharply at her watch while speaking to a harried wedding planner. The planner nodded, eyes wide before rushing out of frame. Even across thousands of miles and a laptop screen, I could feel the tension bleeding through every perfectly curated detail. Suddenly, the feed glitched, frozen for several seconds before resuming. Guests had now begun seating themselves beneath the grand floral arch. My mother appeared in the front row, pristine in a dove-gray suit, dabbing at her eyes already. Beside her, my father tugged at his collar, visibly uncomfortable next to Ryan's father, who sat stiff-backed, eyes scanning the crowd with a gaze I could only describe as appraising. Another buzz from my phone. Heather again. Ryan's mom tried to change ceremony last minute, Bailey's barely holding it together. Also, rumor about Ryan. Call you later. My stomach dropped. A rumor about Ryan? The fiancé she defended, even after I questioned the whirlwind engagement? I wanted to text back a flood of questions, but the processional music began silencing me. Bridesmaids paired with groomsmen began making their way down the aisle, each smiling for the cameras, though some smiles seemed strained. Then Jessica appeared, walking alone, bouquet trembling ever so slightly in her grip. Her gaze darted toward the side of the seating area, as if anticipating something or someone. When the bridal march swelled, the entire crowd stood, and there she was. Caroline, on her father's arm, her gown a masterpiece of lace and crystal, the cathedral-length train trailing like a comet behind her. Her smile was perfection, but her eyes searched the crowd too urgently, too often. For approval? For assurance? For an escape route? I texted Heather again, "Everything okay?" Caroline looked stressed. Her reply came quickly, "So much drama behind the scenes. Tell you later." I clenched my phone, helpless. The ceremony proceeded. Traditional readings, a brief homily from the pastor. Ryan taking Caroline's hands, his expression a practiced mix of devotion and nerves. For a brief moment, I ached, despite everything, our differences, our fights. She was still my sister, and she was walking into a life she had once dreamed about. Yet beneath the fairy tale veneer, I saw the cracks widening. Patricia leaned toward her husband, whispering furiously. Jessica glanced toward the back of the aisle, phone still in hand beneath her bouquet. Then the feed froze again. I cursed under my breath. refreshing the page until the video sputtered back to life just in time to catch the pastor pronouncing them husband and wife. Ryan kissed Caroline, too eager, too performative. They turned to face the crowd as Mr. and Mrs. Sullivan. Applause rose, but through the screen I saw forced smiles, polite clapping that masked the rift splitting the room. The recessional began. Another buzz from Heather. Ryan's mom, furious. Caroline, clueless. Also, rumor is about Diana Winters. You remember her? Diana Winters. The name hit me like a splash of cold water. The blonde socialite who had once been photographed on Ryan's arm at every gala in the city, whose family name carried weight in shipping and old money circles. I barely had time to process that when the feed followed the wedding party to a nearby bridge for formal photos. As the photographer arranged the families, the divide became painfully obvious. Mitchell's on one side, Sullivan's on the other, Carolyn and Ryan caught in between. "Closer together, please," the photographer called, his tone falsely cheerful. Awkward laughter followed as people shuffled half-heartedly. Jessica stood slightly apart, still glued to her phone. Then, as the camera panned away, a server I didn't recognize appeared behind Jessica and handed her an envelope. Her face paled as she read its contents. She immediately pulled the wedding planner aside, both glancing toward Ryan with unmistakable alarm. Heather's next text arrived before I could blink. "Something weird happening. Jessica just got a note, now freaking out. I'll text more." My pulse hammered in my ears. As the camera captured the newlyweds preparing to enter the reception hall, my eyes remained glued to Jessica in the background, her every movement now taut with urgency. Then the screen faded to black, preparing for the next segment. I stared at my reflection in the blank screen, heart racing. What was about to happen next? What was in that mysterious envelope that turned Jessica's face pale just moments before the reception? And if secrets were already unraveling behind the scenes, how long could Caroline's perfect day hold together under the weight of them? Stay with us as Chapter 2 pulls back the curtain on a wedding spiraling toward a truth no one is prepared to face. Chapter 2. "The bride who didn't know you were never supposed to be his bride," Patricia whispered to Caroline, and the camera caught it all. The words replayed in my mind like a haunting echo as the screen came back to life. For a moment after the black fade, the camera captured only ambient footage. Guests moving toward the ballroom, servers arranging champagne flutes on silver trays, the DJ adjusting his headset. But my eyes stayed glued to one figure in the background, Jessica, still clutching the envelope, speaking in hushed tones to the wedding planner, who looked ready to bolt. Heather's text chimed in. Jessica got something about Diana, trying to stop what's coming. My pulse raced. Was Diana Winters, the one person everyone had pretended no longer existed, about to shatter this day? The screen now shifted to the grand ballroom. It was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers hung from the vaulted ceiling, casting soft light over tables dressed in ivory linens and crowned with elaborate centerpieces. At the far end stood the towering 8-tier wedding cake, a confection of white fondant, intricate sugar flowers, but beneath the beauty, tension hung like an electric charge. I scanned the guests' faces as they filtered in. The Mitchell side clustered together, tight, wary, exchanging glances. The Sullivans sat with practiced poise, polished and indifferent, their every move as choreographed as the event itself. My father, seated next to Ryan's father at the head table, looked as though he'd rather be anywhere else. Then came another ping. Ryan was 2 hours late to rehearsal dinner. Drunk. Big fight after. I inhaled sharply. So much had unraveled already, and Caroline, did she know any of it? The camera panned toward the entrance. A server handed the DJ a small flash drive. He plugged it in without hesitation. "Ladies and gentlemen," the DJ's voice rang out before we begin the couple's first dance. "Mrs. Patricia Sullivan has arranged a special surprise for the newlyweds." I sat up straight. On screen, Caroline visibly stiffened. Ryan's expression shifted from mild confusion to barely concealed panic. Patricia approached the microphone, a smile fixed on her face, but her eyes gleaming with something colder. "Ryan and Caroline, marriage is a journey full of surprises. Speaking of surprises, there's someone very special who wanted to celebrate with you today." Jessica half rose from her seat, but the wedding planner gripped her arm. My mother and father exchanged alarmed glances. The lights dimmed, a screen descended from the ceiling. "Please enjoy this special video presentation." Bruno Mars's "Marry You" began to play and the first images appeared. Baby photos of Ryan, school portraits, family holidays. But my gut twisted. This wasn't just a sweet montage. There was a delay, a calculated pause between each frame. And then, she appeared. Diana Winters, at first in group photos, school dances, beach parties, then alone with Ryan. His arm draped casually around her, the unmistakable look of lovers in every frame. A Christmas party time-stamped just 8 months ago. A ski trip in February. 3 months before this wedding. Caroline's expression on screen shifted from confusion to horror. A collective murmur rippled through the room. "Ryan looks like he's going to be sick," Heather texted. Jessica, trying to get to the AV, both but blocked. I stared, breath caught in my throat. The video continued, Diana and Ryan kissing at a fraternity formal, laughing over champagne at a New Year's Eve gala. Then the final image, Diana holding a handwritten sign. "Congratulations, Ryan. Call me when you're ready for the real thing. Love always, Diana." The ballroom erupted. The screen went black, and at the center of it all, the camera captured Caroline. Motionless, devastated, her entire world collapsing in real time. For one long, terrible second after the screen went dark, no one moved. Then Caroline's voice, clear, trembling but sharp, cut through the silence. "Who is Diana?" Her words echoed across the ballroom. Every head swiveled toward the couple. Ryan swallowed hard. An ex from college. "It's nothing." Patricia stepped forward, her voice dripping with condescension. "Diana Winters from the Winters family in Greenwich. They own Winters Shipping. She and Ryan dated for 3 years and were practically engaged before this. Hasty arrangement." My mother's voice rose, outraged. "They've been engaged for a year," Patricia's smile sharpened. "A year isn't long enough to determine if someone fits into a family like ours. Diana comes from the right background. She understands Ryan's responsibilities to the Sullivan name." On screen, Ryan finally found his voice. "Mom, what have you done? We discussed this." "I'm protecting you," Patricia hissed, loud enough for the microphone to catch. "This marriage is a mistake. The prenup isn't even finalized correctly." Caroline's head snapped up. "What prenup?" A cold chill ran through me. My phone vibrated violently. "Heather, Bailey didn't know about a prenup. Ryan's family lawyer brought papers yesterday she refused to sign without reading. Ryan promised to tear them up after the ceremony." On screen, the pieces were falling into place before Caroline's eyes. "You were never going to tear them up, were you?" she whispered. "This whole wedding was just to appease your parents while you kept your options open." Ryan reached for her arm. "Babe, it's complicated. My family's business, the inheritance structure." "And Diana?" Caroline's voice cracked. "Is she complicated too?" Ryan insisted. "That's over." But his eyes darted toward the entrance. Jessica finally reached Caroline's side, whispering urgently in her ear. Caroline's eyes widened further. "She's here." The camera's microphone caught the words perfectly. As if on cue, the grand double doors at the back of the ballroom swung open. Diana Winters entered, poised and perfectly styled in a crimson dress that flouted every wedding guest etiquette imaginable. Behind her, the Sullivan family lawyer clutched a portfolio, almost certainly containing the prenup Caroline had never gripped my armrest, wishing I could reach through the screen. Caroline stood tall, eyes locked on Diana as she approached with a practiced smile. "Ryan, honey," Diana's voice carried through the abandoned microphone. "Your mother called me last week. She said you were making a terrible mistake." Caroline whipped around to face Patricia. "You called her? You invited her here?" Patricia adjusted her designer jacket, unapologetic. "Diana has been part of our lives for years. She understands our family's position in society." "Position?" Caroline repeated, her voice rising. "Is that all that matters to you, not whether your son is happy?" "Happiness is fleeting," Patricia replied coldly. "Legacy is forever." Ryan's father spoke for the first time. "The merger with Winters Shipping alone would increase our holdings by 30%. It's simple business." "Business?" My mother's voice cut through. "This is your son's marriage, not a corporate takeover." Diana stepped closer to Ryan, placing a manicured hand on his arm. "Ryan, honey, you know we were always meant to be together. Your trust fund is intact. Your position at the company is secure. We can go to Bora Bora tonight, just like we planned for your birthday." Caroline's face crumpled. "The birthday trip," she whispered. "The one you canceled because of a business emergency? You were planning to go with her?" Ryan, slurring slightly from too much champagne, stammered, "It's not what it looks like. Diana and I are just friends now." Diana laughed, a sharp tinkling sound. "Friends who kept the suite at the plaza busy twice a month. I still have the key card you gave me, darling." And that was it. Caroline broke, not with collapse, but with fury. "You complete fraud!" she screamed, voice which distorted the live stream audio. "I gave you everything. I changed my hair because your mother said blondes photograph better. I quit the job I loved. I let you cut me off from my friends. And for what?" Ryan stepped back, visibly alarmed at this version of Caroline. "You're making a scene," he hissed. Caroline laughed, a sound teetering on the edge of hysteria. "You want to see a scene?" She grabbed the nearest champagne bottle, upended it over Ryan's head as the crowd gasped. "Bill me," she snapped. "Or better yet, ask Diana to cover the dry cleaning. She can afford it." Jessica handed Caroline the envelope she'd received earlier. Caroline opened it, her face draining of color. "Hotel room receipts," she said, voice rising. "You've been meeting her throughout our engagement. The weekends you were on business trips." Ryan spun around. "Who gave you those? That's private." "Private? Like our marriage? Like the prenup you hid from me?" Ryan's father stepped forward. "That prenup protects generations of Sullivan wealth. Did you really think we'd let it fall into the hands of a kindergarten teacher?" My father shot to his feet. "That's enough. We're leaving. This family is toxic." The camera caught Carolyn, tear-streaked, radiant in her fury as she turned to Ryan. "You were never ready for a real marriage, and I was never meant to be part of this family." Suddenly chaos erupted. Raised voices, glass shattering, the camera lurching as the operator struggled to keep up. In the swirl of motion, the camera refocused, just in time to catch Caroline looking straight at the lens. "You were right to stay away," her eyes seemed to say. Then the live stream froze. What secrets were sealed inside that frozen image? Caroline, standing alone amidst the wreckage of her own wedding? And in that single defiant glance to the camera, could you feel her heartbreak? Or her awakening? Don't miss Chapter 3, where the aftermath begins. And the fight for truth is only just getting started. Chapter 3. The scandal they couldn't contain. The jet is waiting, Ryan. You don't have to go through with this." Diana's voice, calm and coaxing, echoed in my mind long after the screen froze. I stared at the static image. Caroline's tear-streaked face framed in chaos, as if willing the video to resume. My fingers hovered over the trackpad, refreshing the browser again and again. Nothing. A sinking dread filled my chest. The last thing I'd seen was Caroline, drenched in raw fury, turning her gaze straight into the lens, as if reaching across the miles between us. I checked my phone. No new texts from Heather, no calls from Mom or Dad. Silence that grew heavier with every minute. I paced my apartment, still in the navy dress I had donned that morning with such conflicted hope. Now it clung to me like a second skin, a reminder that even from afar, I had been part of something I couldn't unsee. Around midnight, my phone buzzed, a notification that made my heart lurch. Sullivan wedding disaster was trending. With trembling fingers, I opened Twitter. Video clips, shaky, grainy, were already circulating. Guests had captured everything the professional livestream couldn't. 15 seconds of Caroline throwing champagne on Ryan, a snippet of my father, shoving Ryan's dad into the cake table, Diana's dramatic entrance in her red dress, framed like a villain from a soap opera. Each clip was accompanied by captions dripping with mockery. Rich people drama at its finest. When your wedding turns into a corporate hostile takeover, run, Caroline, run. I felt sick. This was no longer a private family nightmare. It had become public spectacle. A text finally arrived. "Heather, it was even worse after the stream cut out. Police came. Call you soon?" I called her immediately, voice shaking. "Is Caroline okay? Where is she?" "She's with your parents," Heather said, sounding exhausted. "Everyone's phones got confiscated after the police showed up. The Sullivans are trying to control the narrative." "Police?" Ryan's brother tried to block Caroline from leaving. Your dad stepped in. It got ugly fast. No arrests, but lots of threats. The Sullivans' lawyers are already spinning it. I closed my eyes, bile rising in my throat. "Heather, what really happened?" "Everything came out," she said softly. "The prenup, the hotel receipts, the texts from Diana. Ryan's been seeing her this whole time. Patricia orchestrated the whole mess." I sank onto the couch, hand over my mouth. "And Caroline?" "Devastated, humiliated, but also relieved, I think, like she finally saw them for what they are." The frozen image on my laptop stared back at me. Caroline frozen mid-reckoning, the perfect metaphor for the life she had just escaped. But the thought of her alone in our parents' house, battered by public judgment and private shame, was unbearable. I grabbed my phone again and booked the earliest flight I could find, Denver to Cincinnati. Watching from a distance wasn't an option anymore. My sister needed me, and this time I wouldn't let her down. The early morning flight from Denver to Cincinnati was a blur. I barely remembered checking in, boarding, or the mechanical hum of the engines. My mind kept looping through fragments of what Heather had told me. Police involvement, the prenup, Diana's smug smile, my sister's broken voice. By the time the plane touched down, exhaustion warred with adrenaline. I didn't care. Caroline was the strongest person I knew, or had thought I knew. But no one could walk away from a public betrayal like that without scars. I pulled my carry-on from the overhead bin with shaking hands. "Don't lose it now," I told myself. "She needs you steady." At baggage claim, I spotted her before she saw me. Caroline stood in the corner, hair scraped into a ponytail, oversized sweatshirt hanging off her frame. No makeup, no armor. She looked so small. I dropped my bag and crossed the distance between us in 3 strides. "I've got you," I whispered into her hair as her body shuddered against mine. "I'm here now." We drove back to our parents' house in silence. The familiar white colonial on Oakwood Lane had transformed into a war room. The dining table was buried under stacks of documents, unsigned prenup pages, wedding contracts, cease and desist letters from the Sullivan lawyers. Mom paced the living room, phone pressed to her ear. Dad sat at the kitchen counter, reading glasses perched on his nose, flipping through legal paperwork with grim determination. As soon as we entered, Mom got up and rushed over. "Caroline, honey, I'm fine," Caroline said, her voice brittle. "I just want to sit." Dad looked up at me, relief flickering in his tired eyes. "You were the smart one, Lauren. You saw what we missed." "No," I said quietly. I just didn't want to believe it either. That night, after our parents had gone to bed, Caroline and I sat on the back porch swing like we used to in high school. Firefly blinked lazily in the darkness. "I should have listened to you," she said finally. "About Ryan, about not trying so hard to be perfect." "You weren't the only one trying," I replied. "I just didn't want to see my sister disappear." She hugged her knees to her chest. "It was all for nothing. I gave up so much, my job, my friends. I changed myself for a family that saw me as a You can take it all back," I said firmly, "starting now." For the first time that night, I saw a flicker of the old Caroline, the one who had once taught me how to stand up straight in front of a mirror and say, "You matter." "We have the live stream," I added. "I saved it before it froze. The whole room saw what happened, but this way, they can't twist it." Her eyes widened. "You did?" "It doesn't show everything, but enough." Patricia's words, Diana's entrance, the look on Ryan's face. "It's all there." She exhaled slowly. "That changes everything." The next morning we gathered in the dining room with Dad's friend, a sharp-eyed attorney named Elaine Brooks. Elaine watched the key portions of the live stream with a tight smile. "Mrs. Sullivan, or shall I say Ms. Mitchell again?" she asked. Caroline straightened. "Definitely Mitchell." Elaine nodded. "You have substantial leverage here. They want this buried. We'll prepare to negotiate on your terms." Caroline's gaze hardened. "I don't want their money. I want an apology, my job back, and the wedding gifts donated to the women's shelter." Elaine's smile widened. "We can make that happen. But be ready. They'll fight dirty." Caroline looked at me, her voice steady. "Then we'll fight smarter." Before I could respond, Mom rushed in with her phone. "Caroline," she said breathlessly, "the Sullivans want a meeting. Their lawyer just called." Caroline's expression didn't waver. "Then let's give them one." But as I glanced at my sister's pale face, I couldn't shake one thought. What new game were the Sullivans about to play next? What game are the Sullivans preparing to play behind closed doors? And how far are they willing to go to silence Caroline? And as the fight shifts from shattered vows to the cold battlefield of legal maneuvering, can one woman reclaim her voice against a family built on legacy and power? Stay with us. Chapter 4 will take you inside the high-stakes negotiation, where every word, every choice, could change Caroline's future forever. Chapter 4. The message that couldn't be deleted. Bailey finally asleep, Ryan's family threatening lawsuits over a damaged reputation. Mom's text had landed at 3:17 a.m., just as my plane began its descent. The words still echoed in my head, cold and clinical. A reminder that even in sleep, this battle wasn't over. Now, hours later, sunlight streamed through the Mitchells' kitchen windows, gilding stacks of legal documents on the dining table. Caroline sat at the head of the table in sweats and a loose hoodie, hair tied up in a messy knot. The same woman who had once agonized over which shade of blush best complemented a designer gown now barely glanced at her reflection in the glass. But her eyes, sharp, clear, held a new fire. "We have one thing they don't," I said, sliding my laptop in front of her. "The truth." I tapped play. The portion of the live stream I'd salvaged flickered onto the screen, grainy but legible. Patricia's voice rang out, sweetly venomous. Diana has been part of our lives for years. She understands our family's position in society. The camera panned to Caroline's shocked face, to Diana's smirk, to Ryan's guilty stare. Caroline watched in silence. When the clip ended, she exhaled shakily. I needed to see that, she whispered. It's not just in my head. No, I said, and now they can't erase it. Lane Brooks, our father's attorney, friend, arrived shortly after with a leather briefcase and a calm, razor-sharp demeanor. I've reviewed your case, she began, flipping through the printouts I'd made of Heather's texts and the social media clips we'd archived before the Sullivans filed takedowns. They're moving fast, Elaine warned, already contacting bloggers, hinting at mental instability on Caroline's part. Of course they are, I muttered. Caroline's jaw tightened. They can say what they want. I want my voice back, and I want them to answer for this. Elaine smiled. Good. Here's our leverage. She outlined it methodically. The livestream segment, text messages from Diana post-reception taunting Ryan, hotel receipts showing the affair timeline, the prenup's exploitative clauses exposed. If they want this buried, they'll have to meet your terms, Elaine said. And if they don't? I asked. Elaine's gaze was ice. Then we go public. A moment of silence hung over the table. Then Mom entered, phone clutched in one hand. Caroline, she said breathlessly. The Sullivans want a meeting. Their lawyer just called. Tomorrow morning. Caroline looked at me, then Elaine. Then let's give them one, she said, voice steady. But as she turned back to the screen, her image frozen in defiance amidst shattered glass, I couldn't shake one gnawing thought. The Sullivans weren't coming to apologize. They were coming to win. The morning of the meeting dawned gray and cold, as if the sky had sensed the war about to unfold. We gathered in the living room over strong coffee and tighter nerves. Caroline sat between me and Elaine, her hands wrapped around a chipped mug, Mitchell squared. Gone was the hollow-eyed bride from the frozen livestream. In her place sat a woman who had already walked through hell and refused to flinch. Remember, Elaine said, her tone even but firm. They want this over as quickly and quietly as possible. You control the pace. You control the tone. We'll use their desperation. Caroline nodded. I'm ready. I caught her eye. And if they try to spin it? Then I'll remind them who orchestrated the circus, she said coolly. We arrived at the downtown law firm, Brooks and Langston, a glass and steel tower rising above the city. In the boardroom, everything gleamed, polished oak table, leather chairs, bottled water lined up with military precision. And then they arrived. Patricia entered first, immaculate in navy Chanel, diamond earrings catching the light. Ryan followed, paler and more disheveled than I'd ever seen him. Behind them, their attorney, a silver-hailed man with the detached air of someone accustomed to buying silence. The greetings were clipped, civil only in form. Elaine opened. We're here to discuss terms. Miss Mitchell has no intention of pursuing litigation, provided your side meets our conditions. Patricia's smile was thin. We're concerned, of course, about the emotional well-being of all parties, and about the damage to our family's reputation from unfortunate misunderstandings. Misunderstand? Caroline cut in, voice like glass. Is that what we're calling public betrayal now? Ryan winced. Patricia pressed on. We are prepared to offer a generous settlement if Ms. Mitchell agrees to sign an NDA regarding the events of the reception. Elaine folded her hands. And Ms. Mitchell has a counter-proposal. Caroline leaned forward. I want a public apology to my family for the humiliation your family orchestrated. My job back at the elementary school with a recommendation letter and all wedding gifts donated to the women's shelter where I volunteer. A heavy silence followed. Patricia's mask slipped for a heartbeat, shock flashing in her eyes. That's highly unusual, their lawyer began. Not as unusual as inviting your son's mistress to a wedding, Caroline replied smoothly. I almost smiled. My sister had found her footing again, and this time no one would push her off balance. Negotiations dragged on for hours. The Sullivans balked at every demand, but the evidence spoke louder. The live stream, the texts, the receipts. Finally, as dusk fell outside the towering windows, Patricia exhaled sharply. Fine, she bit out. We accept. Elaine confirmed the terms in writing, signatures exchanged with icy formality. As we stood to leave, Ryan looked at Caroline. I never meant... She held up a hand. Don't. No apology would undo what had been done. In the elevator, Caroline leaned against the wall, eyes closed for a moment. I think that's what closure feels like, she whispered. But as the elevator doors slid shut, I couldn't shake the sense that this wasn't over. Somewhere behind those polished smiles, I knew the Sullivans weren't done playing games. Was that thinly veiled acceptance from Patricia truly the end of their fight, or merely the calm before another storm? And as Caroline walked away with her hard-won dignity, could the wounds left by betrayal ever truly heal? Or would deeper truths still lie buried beneath polish? Join us in Chapter 5, where a single discovery will reopen old wounds and force Caroline to confront a truth even more devastating than betrayal itself. Chapter 5. The meeting they didn't control. I'm not here to be gaslit, Caroline said, voice calm but cold. I brought receipts. The words landed in the boardroom like a gunshot. Across the polished oak table, Patricia Sullivan's expression flickered, just for a second, before sliding back into practiced indifference. I sat beside Caroline, heart pounding, watching as she laid out a slim folder between us. Inside were the printed texts from Deanna, the hotel receipts, a thumb drive containing the critical segment of the live stream, hard proof that this wasn't a misunderstanding or a bride's breakdown, as the Sullivan lawyer had been hinting through back channels. Elaine leaned forward, her tone clipped. Ms. Mitchell is prepared to sign a mutual non-disparagement agreement, but only under the terms we outlined. Patricia glanced at Ryan, who sat slumped in his chair, eyes shadowed with sleepless guilt, or perhaps fear of what might still emerge. Their lawyer cleared his throat. Our concern is that continued public discussion of these unfortunate events could further damage both families. Your family's reputation is not my concern, Caroline replied evenly. Your choices led us here. Patricia's fingers tightened around her pen. What exactly are you demanding? She asked, voice brittle. Caroline didn't hesitate. A public apology addressed to my family for the humiliation orchestrated at my wedding. My job reinstated with a recommendation letter. All wedding gifts donated to the women's shelter where I volunteer. And confirmation in writing that the prenup is null and void. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Patricia leaned back, folding her arms. You're being unreasonable, she said flatly. Elaine's smile didn't reach her eyes. What's unreasonable is demanding a woman surrender her autonomy while grooming her for a marriage built on deceit. Ryan's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Patricia opened her mouth to object again, but Caroline cut her off. I don't need your money, she said quietly. But I will have my truth. The room chilled several degrees. As negotiations wore on, the Sullivans attempted every maneuver. Soft appeals, veiled threats, even a moment of faux empathy from Ryan himself. Caroline, you don't want to drag this out, he murmured once, gaze pleading. I didn't drag anything out, she replied. You and your family did that the moment you brought Diana into my wedding. Patricia's mask cracked then, her jaw clenched, knuckles white against the table. Fine, she bit out eventually. We'll accept the terms, provided all parties sign the non-disparagement agreement today. Elaine nodded. We'll review the final language before signing. As the Sullivans' legal team left the room to draft the revisions, I turned to Caroline. "You're holding the line?" I whispered. She met my gaze, exhaustion and steel coiled in her eyes. "I'm done letting them write my story," she said. But even as her voice steadied, I caught the faintest tremor in her fingers, because we both knew this meeting wasn't the end. And somewhere beneath the Sullivans' grudging concession, another game was already in motion. The Sullivan team returned to the boardroom an hour later, legal pads filled with edits and carefully neutral language. Elaine reviewed every line with surgical precision. "No clause limiting Caroline's future employment," she corrected. "And this language," she tapped a paragraph, attempting to frame the incident as a mutual misunderstanding. "Strike it." Patricia bristled. "We must maintain a degree of narrative control." Elaine arched an eyebrow. "You forfeited that when you invited Diana to the reception and publicly humiliated my client." I sat silent, watching Caroline. Her knuckles whitened as she gripped her water glass, but her expression remained composed. When Ryan's lawyer reluctantly agreed to the edits, the documents were reprinted. "We are ready to sign," the Sullivan lawyer announced stiffly. Caroline took the pen with steady fingers. "One more thing," she said before lowering it to the page. Patricia's eyes narrowed. "Now what?" Caroline met her gaze. "I want a personal apology from Ryan. In writing. No scripted legalese. I want it for myself." Ryan's head jerked up, color draining from his face. "Caroline, you owe me that much," she said softly. There was a long pause. Patricia whispered furiously to her lawyer. Finally, through clenched teeth, Ryan agreed. "Fine. I'll write it." "Good," Caroline replied. "Then we're done." She signed first, her pen scratching steadily across the page. I felt a strange swell of pride and sorrow watching her, my sister, bloodied but unbroken. As the final signatures dried, Patricia rose abruptly. "This was an unfortunate chapter for all involved. We trust it will remain private moving forward." "That depends on you," Elaine replied coolly. We gathered our things in silence. At the elevator, Ryan approached Caroline, eyes shadowed. "Caroline, for what it's worth." "It's worth nothing," she said, voice devoid of malice, only truth. "Goodbye, Ryan." The doors closed. In the parking garage, Caroline finally exhaled, leaning against a pillar. "I think that's what closure feels like," she whispered. Elaine smiled faintly. "It's also called winning." We drove home in silence, headlights carving twin paths through the dark. But even as the house came into view, my phone buzzed. A text from Heather. "Lauren, just heard. Patricia's lawyer filed a motion to seal the live stream segment in court. They are trying to bury it completely." I showed the message to Caroline. Her jaw tightened. "Then they're not done," she said quietly. "Neither are we." And in that moment, I saw, beneath the exhaustion, a new resolve hardening in her gaze. Whatever game the Sullivans had planned next, they weren't ready for this version of my sister. Will Patricia's attempt to bury the livestream segment be their final move, or the spark that reignites a battle Caroline thought she'd already won? And as Caroline stands at the edge of reclaiming her voice, how far would you go to protect the truth when powerful forces seek to erase it? Stay with us. Chapter 6 will reveal whether Caroline's fight for justice ends in quiet surrender, or in a moment that changes her life forever. Chapter 6. The life she claimed back. This wasn't a rescue. I rescued myself, Caroline told me, 6 months later, as we watched the first snow fall over Denver. She said it softly. No bitterness, no bravado, just a simple truth earned the hard way. A lot had changed since that cold spring day when the Sullivans reluctantly signed her terms. After the settlement was finalized, after the public apology was issued, half-hearted buried on page 3 of the Cincinnati Enquirer, Caroline had packed her life into 2 suitcases and moved west. "Fresh start," she'd said on the phone. "If you'll have me. Always." I'd replied. Now she lived 3 blocks from my apartment in Capitol Hill, in a bright third-floor walk-up with mismatched furniture and sunlight streaming through tall windows. Gone was the platinum hair. Her natural chestnut had returned, curling softly at her shoulders. She wore jeans, sweaters, sneakers, clothes chosen for comfort, not for anyone else's approval. And slowly, the sister I thought I'd lost had re-emerged. We established a Sunday dinner tradition, sometimes cooking together, sometimes exploring new restaurants. No more country clubs, she joked the first night, raising her wine glass. No more curated guest lists, I replied. But beneath the laughter, healing was still a work in progress. Some nights Caroline would wake from dreams she couldn't explain, half memory, half nightmare, her breath quick and shallow. Other times, a passing mention of a gala or a wedding would shadow her expression for hours. "It's not the event," she explained once, stirring soup absent-mindedly. "It's the feeling that I let them mold me into someone I barely recognized." "You're not that person anymore," I reminded her. She smiled then, genuine, warm. "No, and I don't intend to be again." She returned to teaching, now at a progressive elementary school not far from her new apartment. "It's small, but I can be myself," she told me after her first week. "The kids don't care who I was supposed to marry or what foundation I chaired. They just want someone who listens." And perhaps most telling of all, Caroline enrolled in a photography course she'd once dismissed as frivolous. "Remember when Mom said it was a waste of time?" She grinned. "Well, I'm finally doing it." We both laughed, a little freer each time, but not all echoes of the past were so easily silenced. One crisp October evening as we finished dinner, my phone buzzed with a message from Heather. "Thought you should know. Patricia's lawyer filed a new motion today. They're trying to seal court records permanently, including the live stream evidence." I showed it to Caroline, expecting anger. Instead, she leaned back, eyes thoughtful. "They're still afraid," she said quietly. "What will you do?" I asked. She met my gaze, her voice steady. "I think it's time I tell the story my way." And in that moment, I saw it, clear as the snow swirling beyond the window. Caroline wasn't running anymore. She was ready to stand. "I think it's time I tell the story my way," Caroline had said, and she meant it. In the weeks that followed, she poured herself into writing, a process that was less about revenge and more about reclaiming her voice. "Not a tell-all," she explained to me one night as we sat at her kitchen table, mugs of tea in hand. "More like a letter to the woman I used to be, and to anyone who's ever been there." The live stream clips that Patricia had fought so hard to bury had become a symbol, not of shame, but of truth. "They want it gone because it shows what they really value," Caroline said, "and because it shows that I walked away." With Elaine's guidance, she worked carefully, balancing what she could legally share, ensuring that her words remained her own, not bound by the Sullivans' carefully crafted narrative. And when she was ready, she recorded an episode of The Unwritten Vows, a podcast series focused on reclaiming one story after public scandal. "I never thought I'd do something like this," she told me, setting up her mic. "But if my story can help even one person see that walking away is strength, not failure, then it's worth it." When the episode aired, messages poured in. Women from all walks of life writing to say thank you, to share their own stories, to tell Caroline that her courage had given them hope. I watched as my sister stood taller with each passing day, not defined by what had happened to her, but by what she chose to do next. At school, she flourished, becoming not just a teacher, but a mentor to students navigating their own struggles. "They ask about resilience sometimes," she told me after class one afternoon. "I tell them it's like a muscle. You build it every time you choose yourself." And yet, some wounds ran deeper. One crisp winter evening, as we walked through the snow-dusted streets of Capitol Hill, Caroline hesitated in front of a bookstore window. "I used to imagine writing a book one day," she said softly. "But I always thought it had to be about success, not survival." "Maybe survival is success," I replied. She smiled, eyes bright. Maybe it is. A few days later, I found a draft document open on her laptop titled, "The Life I Claimed Back." She'd written more than she realized. "Do you think anyone would read it?" she asked. "I think they need to," I said. Then, one evening in early spring, as we sat in her apartment sipping wine, my phone buzzed with an email alert. I glanced at it and froze. "Caroline, you need to see this." She took the phone from my hand. An anonymous message. One sentence. "Not everything about that night has come to light yet." We stared at the screen in silence, because sometimes the past doesn't stay buried. And sometimes the final chapter is still unwritten. Thank you for watching this story on FM Revenge. If it resonated with you or reminded you that sometimes the hardest endings lead to the strongest new beginnings, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. We have many more stories of truth, resilience, and redemption coming your way. Until next time, stay strong and stay true.